Thank you. Hello. Thanks so much. What a great group. It's great to be out here. I want to thank Art Laffer for inviting me. It's great to be with Alec. Did you not get the CDC's memo? I don't see you guys complying. And I say that jokingly, but I think that may be a sign of potentially seeking to do more things into the future. And I think it's very important that we say unequivocally no to lockdowns, no to school closures, no to restrictions, and no mandates. Floridians are free to choose, and all Americans should be free to choose how they govern their affairs, how they take care of themselves and our families, and they should not be consigned to live, regardless of which state in the union, consigned to live in a Faucian dystopia in which we're governed by the whims of bureaucratic authorities who care little for our freedom, little for our aspirations, and little for our happiness. No more. We can't let it happen going forward. And I think it's important to learn some of the lessons of what we saw over the past year and a half. There's a number of things I think we can look back on and point to different things that were just total catastrophes. I think a lot of these interventions, almost all of them, were totally ineffective, but they had catastrophic consequences for tens of millions of Americans. And to me, probably the most significant policy failure were the states that kept schools closed last school year. You had a situation where when the virus first hit, traditionally, when you talk about disease mitigation, people would look at schools as a place where it would really foster a lot of spread throughout the communities, and that's certainly true with influenza. So there was a lot of precautionary things done initially, distance learning, all this. But as the data started coming in, it was very clear by May of 2020 that not only were our school kids at virtually no risk from coronavirus, they were not efficient spreaders of it. And so schools, places that had schools open, did not see major outbreaks. And so my view was we have got to have every parent in Florida, they have a right to send their kids to school in person, and we've got to make that happen. And so we had to do this last summer, and that was at the height of, the Sun Belt has a summer COVID season, as we're seeing now. This was something that we were dealing with in Florida, and the hysteria was off the charts. You had people saying all this stuff. You can't send the kids to school. The teachers union actually sued me to keep the schools closed, and what they would do is they would actually bring coffins and put them in front of our Florida Department of Education building. So it was really, the data was very clear that this is something that should have happened, and obviously from a policy perspective, kids need to be in school, parents need to have an ability, particularly our single mothers. So it was evidence and facts and what was good policy and good for Floridians on one side versus basically hysteria, corporate media narrative, and a bunch of fear-mongering. And it was blindingly obvious that was something we needed to do. So we did it. I remember when we first, some of our first school districts, when they first started the middle of August, you had like these national corporate media come down there, go, oh my gosh, these yokels, what are they doing to the kids and all this other stuff. Fact is, it was good. People are very happy that happened. But just think about the millions of kids who got locked out of school for over a year in certain jurisdictions. So it seems to be like if you have certain God-given rights in the United States, but I guess the right to better yourself through education, if you happen to live in a real deep blue enclave controlled by the teachers union, that's just not something that you have opportunities to do, and we saw that. And I think those lockdowns of the kids and the closures for a year and a half, I think those are going to have consequences, not just months, years, but I think decades from now, you'll be able to trace back problems that emanated because kids totally fell off the radar and fell off the map. And so all it took was leadership. All it took was an ability to kind of go into the fray and fight back on behalf of students and families in Florida. And it was obviously the right thing to do. Fast forward now, and so in Florida, we never impose mitigation. We didn't impose a mask mandate on anybody the whole time, but on schools, we didn't. We said that school districts have to, do what they think is right. So the result was you had a difference of approaches throughout the state. We're a big, diverse state. That was fine. And I can tell you, regardless of the approach, for those school districts that did not have masks, or private schools or charter schools that didn't have masks, there was no statistically significant difference in the outcome versus the ones that did more intensive mitigation and made the kids wear masks. And so here we are now, and the CDC is saying every single person in a school needs to wear a mask all day, even if you're vaccinated, even if you've recovered from COVID, which, by the way, you are immune if you've recovered from COVID. CDC doesn't admit that, but it's true. And so in Florida, our view is this is a decision that the parents can make about what's best for their kids. If the parent really believes that that would be better for their kid, I'm not going to prevent them from doing that if that's what they want. But that should not be imposed on all parents and all students. And it's not healthy for these students to be sitting there all day, 6-year-old kids in kindergarten, covered in masks. So this is going to be something where I think you're going to continue to have the unions and the CDC, and they're basically one and the same right now. They work in tandem, and they're going to be trying to do this. And I fear that they're trying to set up additional school closures because as the season changes, you'll start to see more, quote, COVID cases in northern places and areas where they have more of a foothold. And I think they're setting the stage to deny even more kids in education. So we can't let that happen. Now in Florida, we have robust school choice, so we didn't let that happen. But if it had happened, people would have been able to go elsewhere. And I think you're going to see more and more of that throughout the United States. We are going to probably have, by the time I'm up for re-election, we'll probably have between 200,000 and 250,000 students on various types of private school choice. We have a tax credit scholarship for low-income families. 100,000. I created a new scholarship with the help of Danny in the legislature. So we have a family empowerment scholarship now, which is likely going to probably hit 100,000 kids in a couple years. And then we've got scholarships for kids with special needs. And so you have a lot of folks, a lot of kids who have that. So we have huge amount of folks, and that doesn't even count all the public charter schools we have. We have hundreds of thousands of kids on charter schools. And if you look at a place like where Danny's from, Miami-Dade County, they're the highest performing urban school district in the country, and 70% of the students in Miami-Dade County do not go to their neighborhood school that they're, quote, zoned for. They either go on private scholarship somewhere, public charter somewhere, and then school choice within the school district as well. And I think the result has been students are in the best environment for them, and the performance speaks for itself. They're number one in the country, so we're proud of them for that. So over the last year, Florida chose freedom over Fauciism. We continue to do that. That means having an economy that's open, protecting people's right to earn a living, making sure that people's livelihoods are intact. We were projected to be an economic basket case when COVID first hit because people said, look, no one's going to go, tourism's going to dry up, you're going to have all these problems, whatever. And, I was resolved to make sure that while all these other states just continued to beat people down, lock them down, we would be lifting people up. And so we steadily got people to work. We got the economy going. And as we got into the summer of last year, you started to see it really pick up. And then pretty soon, Florida became the respite for people. Yeah, you have people moving down here, but it's not always easy to just move your whole life. But if people needed to escape lockdowns, they came and stayed in Florida for 2 or 3 weeks, and that just became the norm, and I'd run into people all the time doing that. So the result was our unemployment rate throughout the balance of the pandemic was significantly less than the national average, and almost half of what it was in some of the big-time lockdown states like California and New York and some of those. And that means huge, huge for these families and for their livelihoods, and yes, for their health as well. Because people are destitute, they lose their job, their health sinks too. So it's not just dollars and cents, it's about physical, mental health, and it's about the pursuit of happiness. So we're glad just this last month we added 70,000 additional private sector jobs, partially because we removed the additional unemployment payment and incentivized people to get back to work. I had 500,000 jobs open sitting there. And so we're going to continue to build off our success on the economy. We're not missing a beat. And our budget was projected to be a total disaster because, again, you're not having people come. We're sales tax driven. It's not like California where the tech companies pay all the tax. Like we do a lot of people based on tourism and whatnot. And so we were projected with a major hole. I vetoed $1 billion out of the budget, which was the most vetoes in the history of Florida to do that. So then we were in a situation where we had stabilized that, but then because of the health of the economy, we're bringing in more revenue, even with the lowest per capita tax burden in the country, because of the underlying incentives that we created for job growth, business, and all that. And so we got to the point where during the most recent legislative session, before the legislature did the budget, they did the estimate for the rest of the fiscal year, April, May, June, which is the rest of our fiscal year. And this is real-time estimate, and yet we were coming in $800 million above estimate for April, $500 million above for May, I think $700 million for June. So just in the last 3 months of the fiscal year, we took in $2 billion above estimate. And we have the healthiest reserves that we've ever had as a state. And throughout the entire COVID pandemic, I never touched one penny from the state's rainy day fund. And in fact, we've been able to add to the rainy day fund. So we're well positioned going forward. And that allows us to do things. We're a growing state. We got a lot of good stuff on infrastructure that we've had to do. We have stuff with our water resources as a coastal state, a boating state, fishing, very important that we have clean water. So we're doing a lot of good stuff, but we would not have been able to do that had we just decided to lock down the state indefinitely, throw hundreds of thousands of people out of work, and ruin businesses up and down the state. We've done the opposite. I would say most of these folks, not only are they doing good, I mean, in all regions of the state, they'll say, we've never been doing this good ever about what's going on now in Florida. And I think the lesson from it is, and I go back and I look at Eisenhower's farewell address, when you think about how you handle something like COVID. Eisenhower, many remember because he pointed out the military-industrial complex. He's very smart about that. I mean, he was pretty much right on the money. But he also, in that speech, talked about the rise of scientific research intermingled with government funding and government institutions. And he recognized that as a danger. And I think, just as an aside, that's a big problem now because when Fauci makes these pronouncements, people don't want to contradict him, even if he's wrong, because they fear that they won't get funding in the future. But what Eisenhower was worried about was, okay, you're going to have this, he called it a technological scientific elite, and he said you can't just let public policy be captive to some unelected group of people who are wielding a lot of this power through the research. And he's like, a statesman, yes, take into account what they say. And I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of like the Faucis of their time. You can take into account, but you should actually have a diverse group of views just right there, because there was a lot of scientists who were right on a lot of this stuff while Fauci was flip-flopping. They got it right, and they were marginalized because they were challenging the narrative. But Eisenhower said, you got to look at all these other factors, and the job of the statesman is to harmonize that, and you can't just let one group of people hijack policy to the exclusion of every other consideration in society. And I think some of those states did that. They made this bizarre pursuit of having COVID disappear, which was never in the cards, was not going to happen, their goal, and they left a lot of destruction in their wake. And so I think you need to see the big picture. I think Eisenhower was right, and that's what we did in Florida, and that's what we're going to continue to do in Florida in the battles ahead. And so I thank you all for your involvement. I thank you for fighting on behalf of freedom. There's a lot of work to be done to defend federalism. We've tangled with the Biden administration on a number of occasions. We beat them in court on the CDC shutting down the cruise lines and forcing vaccine passports. And We're fighting them on the border and on some of the illegal, and we'll keep doing that because I think that there's going to be a lot of battles ahead. But the way it is right now in this country, when you stand for freedom, when you stand for those core values that make America unique, there's a lot of folks that are going to come after you. Corporate media will come after you and smear you. Big tech will likely try to censor you or deplatform, and I don't even need to talk about the bureaucracy and what's going on in Washington right now. So it requires people to have courage. When you're in this arena, understand when you're fighting, you got to be able to take a punch and stand strong. But when you do that, when you stand up for the people that sent you in your offices and they see you fighting and they see you fighting against the grain, man, they will be there for you thick and thin. They will walk over broken glass barefoot to be able to support you. So in Florida, we'll continue to stand firm. We'll be holding the line. We will not back down. And I can tell you this, we've only begun to fight. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Give him a
Thank you.